What if I told you that at one point, American hi-fi dominated the world, and it all started and kind of ended in Boston? Because believe it or not, some of the greatest American hi-fi brands like KLH, Advent, Boston Acoustics, Snell, Acoustic Research, all operated within a 20-mile radius. Then almost at the same time, like some grand audiophile mystery, they all vanished. So what happened? How did the city that literally built American hi-fi lose it almost overnight? And what did all these companies have in common? It should have been the one thing, the one strength, but ended up being the downfall for all of them. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, maybe sign up for the Cam Coffee Club, link in the description, and let's talk about how the mecca of American hi-fi was literally destroyed, like an asteroid hit it. Between 1954 and 1984, Boston was basically the capital of American hi-fi. In just 30 years, Acoustic Research, KLH, Advent, EPI, Snell, Boston Acoustics, Cambridge Soundworks, and ADS all launched within 20 miles of each other. 8 major audio companies, 1 city, 1 generation. But by the early 2000s, all of them were either sold off, surviving in name only, or they just went bankrupt. The Boston hi-fi era burned fast, it burned quick, and it was done in 3 decades. If you're a music lover, you need to check it out because it is the easiest way to take your creativity to the next level. And Suno is helping music listeners become music creators. I am obsessed with sitar and heavy metal, and I created this song combining them. For me, I use a lot of music in my videos. I have a subscription to a royalty-free music site. However, it takes forever to find the perfect song with the perfect vibe. With Suno, I can just create it because I can take a concept in my mind and work with Suno to create something out of nothing. And it's mine forever. I have all commercial rights to it. I know you love music, so give Suno a try. This week is the best time to do it. You get 40% off your annual plan, 20% off a month. Use the link in the description or click on this QR code right now and get started today. Give Suno a try. Post-World War II Boston wasn't just a college town, it was a speaker-building pressure cooker. MIT, Harvard, you had engineering everywhere. Physicists, radio techs, mathematicians. Industrial space was cheap, and everyone had an oscilloscope. And back then, hi-fi was basically a science experiment. It's like at one point, every physicist or engineer in Boston woke up and said, listen, we can figure out a way to make a better internal combustion engine, cure cancer, or make speakers. And then everyone said, yeah, definitely speakers. We need to make better tweeters. And because of that, Boston became a breeding ground for audio startups and brilliant founders. And those startups created some of the most iconic American hi-fi pieces ever. And it all began with one guy. Acoustic Research didn't just make speakers. They bent physics and changed audio forever. It all started in the early 1950s with a New York professor, Edgar Vilcher, and his student and protege, Henry Kloss. 2 guys that looked at the giant boxy speakers of the era and said, we can do this way better. And in 1954, they invent acoustic suspension, a small sealed cabinet that suddenly had bass and could embarrass speakers twice its size. And they didn't just compete, they destroyed the competition. The AR1, AR2, and guess what? The AR3. They became some of the most famous American speakers ever made. Their genius design doesn't always scale very well. And in 1967, Vilcher sells Acoustic Research. Some people said way too early, but here's the thing. He didn't want to run a big company. And Acoustic Research was sold to Teledyne, and their soul evaporated. Teledyne was slow to incorporate new materials, slow to innovate, and slow to market anything. Meanwhile, Japanese importers were starting to show up with better features and a lower price. So what went wrong? Well, the founder left. The engineering culture disappeared. Corporate owners don't understand audiophiles. But what happened to Edgar Vilcher's protege? Well,
why did you buy this place?
If acoustic research broke physics, well then KLH, they broke everything else. KLH stands for Kloss, Lowe, and Hoffman. And for a while, KLH was a monster. The Model 5, the Model 6, guess what? The Model 7. Kloss said, I love the way we named things at Acoustic Research. Let's do it over here too. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why did they start at 5 though? Anyway, those models became hits. And guess what they adopted? Acoustic suspension. They also created, get this, the world's first battery-powered transistor radio. KLH was a rare American hi-fi company that made music affordable, portable, and actually good. However, Henry Kloss basically had the attention span of a well-caffeinated golden retriever. And in 1964, he sells KLH to Singer. That's right, the sewing machine company. So obviously, they knew how to run an audio company. And overnight, KLH basically got their name slapped on everything. Clock radios, speakers, but now they were cutting costs. And Kloss walked out the door and left behind some really great ideas. But Henry Kloss wasn't done blowing up companies quite yet. There was 2 more on his checklist. Henry Kloss returns again. This time it was the Tokyo Drift portion of his career, although I kind of like Tokyo Drift. I thought that was a good movie. In 1967, he started Advent. And almost immediately, the company became an audio phenomenon. And he changed up the model names, finally. The Advent Large. Not the Venti, Large. Turned into one of the best-selling speakers in the 1970s. Huge bass, great mids, ridiculously good value. And once again, they did something crazy. Another rabbit out of the hat. Advent creates one of the world's first projection TVs. Big picture, big ambition. And Advent became known as the smart guy's speaker. But genius and impulse control rarely live in the same house. And Kloss bet the entire company on projection TVs. He overspends, underestimates costs, and the delays and invoices start piling up. And they proved one thing, that a great speaker company can become a terrible television company immediately.
Well, there goes another one.
EPI, also known as Epicure, which I feel like should be the name of some type of medicine. Upset stomach, IBS, Epicure. It starts with Winslow Burho. Sounds like the character in a British crime drama. Winslow. He was the famous engineer that designed the Burho module. I wonder where he got that name. It was a tweeter and woofer combo so simple, so elegant, it becomes the golden ratio for speaker design. The EPI 100 turns into one of the best-selling value speakers. Neutral and musical, beautifully voiced, and apparently way ahead of its time. However, great engineering can't keep up with a spirited game of hot potato. The company gets bought by Harman, then sold again, then resold. And through all the sales, parts get cheapened, the magic obviously disappears, quality craters, and meanwhile, the market shifts. By 1980, the Boston audiophile mecca got another star with a very creative name, Boston Acoustics. Founded by 2 former Advent engineers, Andy Katsatos and Frank Reed. And they strike gold almost immediately with the A7, A100, A150. That series of speakers became legendary. Again, great engineering and great pricing. And they didn't just stop at home audio. Boston Acoustics also crushed it in car audio. And for a while, they were one of the last great American speaker companies. But, just like all the other companies, the Boston Audio Reaper was knocking at the front door. Boston Acoustics gets sold to D&M Holdings. What does the D and the M stand for? Denon and Marantz, which would later get rolled into Sound United. which would later get sold to Massimo, which would later get sold to Harman. Anyway, we all know how this movie ends. R&D shrinks, brand identity evaporates, and just like that, they went from designing audiophile speakers to budget speakers that were on the shelves of Best Buy. And the problem with Boston Acoustics is they didn't have the cult-like status that some of the other companies had, like Acoustic Research and Advent. But the godfather of Boston Hi-Fi, who refuses to die, was back at it again with a new company. Just when he thought he was out, he was pulled back in. That's right, Henry Kloss. In 1988, he launches Cambridge Soundworks, and he had a bit of experience, and Cambridge Soundworks was years ahead of anybody else. They were doing direct-to-customer sales in the 80s, and he basically just brings back reimagined classics like the Model 6, the Model 12, and quietly builds yet another multimedia speaker empire, which basically ended up in pretty much every dorm room in America. For a minute, it felt like Kloss had finally cracked the formula. Smart engineering, value pricing, modern distribution. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it is Henry Kloss that we're talking about. He leaves. Shocker. The company gets sold to Creative Labs. It was a firm that built sound cards. You know, the computer things. The brand obviously gets diluted and eventually repurposed into computer speakers. Snell Acoustics, another Boston company that ended like a Greek tragedy. Founded in 1976 by Peter Snell, the company built speakers so obsessively tuned, they were literally matched. Every pair. Every speaker had its own twin. Every component was hand verified. And the Snell Type A became a cult icon and is still one of the most respected American speakers of all time. Snell wasn't building cabinets, he was building instruments. But in 1984, sadly, Peter Snell dies, and the magic of Snell dies with him. The company continued, but it was never the same. Peter Snell cast a big shadow, and none of the existing nor new engineers could replace him. Ownership changed, and guess where they ended up? With D&M Holdings. You know, the company that scooped up Boston Acoustics, the Denon, the Marantz. And since they didn't have the brand cachet as Denon and Marantz, there was no investment. And at this time, the market was shifting to home theater. And eventually, Snell is just shut down. But what about one more company? Maybe that was founded by a NASA engineer. ADS stands for Analog and Digital Systems, and while it was not started in Boston, it became a bit of a Boston darling. The company was co-founded by Gunther Schneider. He was a former German aerospace and NASA engineer. Project Paperclip. I'm just kidding, I have no idea. He was bored at NASA, apparently, and said, I want to build speakers. And they were the definition of German engineering meets East Coast sound. Clean cabinets, rubber surrounds, tweeters that looked like Frankenstein's monster. And they were big. Real big. And ADS quickly became a staple in American hi-fi. But, well, they were in Boston, the Bermuda Triangle of American hi-fi. They were caught between inflexible German engineering and rising costs. Oh yeah, and Americans, they didn't want to pay a lot for speakers. Distribution was messy, marketing was inconsistent, and by the 1990s, ADS was basically done. However, ADS didn't crash quite as hard and fast as most of the companies we've talked about today. And ADS, one of the most cult-like, passionate fan bases out there. So what can we learn from the Boston Speaker Massacre? Pretty much every Boston hi-fi brand imploded, but their ideas influenced audio as we know it. Acoustic suspension, bookshelf speakers, affordable hi-fi, car audio breakthroughs, direct-to-customer sales, hand-tuned, hand-paired reference speakers. Boston, in a way, helped create American hi-fi. But what's the real lesson in all of this? Brilliant engineering cannot outrun the realities of business. In the golden age of hi-fi, if you build it, they will buy it and listen to it, only applied for a few years. Today, the leader of a company needs to be able to balance a checkbook or hire somebody that can balance a checkbook. Today, Boston is known for tech startups, biotech and pharmaceuticals, robotics. So maybe sometime in the future, your new at-home robot that you have watering your plants can also move that vintage pair of ADS in place because they're super good and super heavy. If you like this video, check out the video I just did about basically the rise and fall of Kenwood. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, and send it to a buddy who you think will like it. Thank you so much for watching.